Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay in the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
What's up, Night fans? Welcome to the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff, Sharon, Eric Lopez with you during championship week in college basketball. Eric, it's the most wonderful time of year, isn't it?
It is, and it's certainly one of the more wonderful and maybe exciting weeks in UCF basketball heading into a conference tournament in a while.
Yeah, I know that thinking back to maybe those late A Sundays when we were good in both women's and men's. I think that's about the time when there was this much anticipation about it. But we'll talk about both. We got obviously the UCF women's team and their run in the American Athletic Conference tournament came to an end at the hands of UConn. The men's team is getting ready to head up to Hartford right now to play in their tournament. And we got lots to talk about with that. We've got baseball, we've got softball, we've got even some UCF alumni news out of the NFL with free agency starting. Lots to talk about on this show. So make sure you follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com. You can subscribe to us via email there. You can also follow us on Twitter at UCF_Banneret. And look us up on Facebook at Black and Gold Banneret as well. You can also follow me at Jeff_Sharon. You can follow Eric at Eric Lopez Elo. And you can also subscribe to this podcast, if you don't already, on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and, of course, TuneIn Radio. But let's dive in, Eric, with men's basketball heading into their American Athletic Conference run. And we're going to have Taylor Young, UCF's radio analyst, joining us once again to break things down the end of the season, and looking forward to the AAC tournament. But, they got the win against USF to finish out the season and get win number 20. And, Eric, I don't know about you, but I thought that was how that game was going to go because USF, I thought, really played out of their shoes. They wanted to get that win on senior day. They knew they could spoil our 20-win season in the regular season at that point. And somehow we squeaked it out, didn't we?
We did, and look, B.J. Taylor made some clutch shots. That's one of the reasons why he's an all-conference second-team member. And then Taco Fall was a big factor on the defensive side, altered some shots late for USF. That's why he's the defensive player of the year in the American Conference. They found a way to win. It was huge to get them into a bye, and they're the number 4 seed now going into this tournament. It was huge for them. You're right, USF was going to bring a lot of emotions to that game. But look, the big thing is UCF has found ways to win. They found a way to win that game. They found a way to win the game at East Carolina. They found a way to win a game at Temple. So they found a way to win at home against Cincinnati. That's the thing that's encouraging from this team is they have learned to find ways to win games even when they haven't played at a high level. And that's going to be a key factor, I'm sure, going up this week in Hartford. UCF's going to take on Memphis. And, Jeff, and as Coach Dawkins said, when it's conference postseason time, that means anything can happen. Expect the unexpected, even though you played Memphis twice.
Look back at the film. We played them twice, home and away. We both split. They won at home. We won at home. So there are things that we'll, I'm surely, take away from our games versus them. And also, you have to be ready for the unexpected. In a tournament format, people can, surprise you because it's just a one-game situation each time out, and they can do some things a little bit different and make adjustments. So, we have to be a little bit prepared for everything.
There you go, Coach Dawkins. And look, who better than Coach Dawkins? He's played in these conference tournaments. He's coached in these conference tournaments. So it's going to be exciting. Big game. UCF Memphis, 4 versus 5. They split, home teams winning. So I don't know what you could, it's one of those things. While both teams, I think, know each other and know their tendencies and certainly have keys. But I think, as he said there, Jeff, it's a one-game deal. Anything can happen. Expect some of the unexpected to happen in these type of situations.
Well, I don't know what to expect, but one guy who might tell us what to expect is going to be our guest for today, because Taylor Young is going to join us here to talk about UCF's the way UCF finished up the regular year and what they're going to expect heading into the American Athletic Conference tournament. And so, without further ado, here is UCF's radio basketball analyst, none other than UCF alum Taylor Young. And here he is, joining us now, Taylor Young, UCF alum, former UCF guard, and now UCF's radio analyst, joining us now to talk a little UCF hoops for the second time this season. And T.Y., hey, thanks again, first of all, for coming on the show. You know how much we like you, and so much so that we brought you back a second time. So what's up, man? How you feeling?
It's a pleasure to be on, man, and it's the best time of year because it's March.
I know. It's really cranked up, man. Here we are now. You know, it's tournament time all of a sudden. It seems like the season just barely got started, but you know, I guess my first question for you is this where you thought the team would be back before the new year?
Well, before the new year, if you asked me before the season started, I'd say no. You know, I think it's been remarkable. And then if you talk about before the new year, I think you were waiting for their thin bench to kind of catch up with them. You know, you just one or two injuries or away from being devastated. And I'm amazed how they've weathered that storm. I don't think fans and you know, Mark and I were on the radio talk about that enough. You know, you lose a Chance McSpadden, you know, over the summer. You lose somebody to eligibility issue that you thought you'd be able to have, and that's what I'm surprised about. You know, and then they went on that skid in the middle of the conference, and you kind of said, "Oh, wow, maybe it's caught up with them. Maybe they're tired." And then to roll out 5 wins and playing the way they've played, it really is remarkable.
Yeah, they had that stretch where they lost 6 out of 7, and then that Tulsa win happened, and that was, you know, it win by 18 points, and then that was the key because, you know, that's the first of that last 5, and you know, the win over Cincinnati was the real capper. We talked, you know, Lopez and I talked about the win over USF. The win over USF, I thought I was really impressed by because we just did not play well in that game. They were ready for us, and they found a way to win. And I've always thought, I wonder what you think about this. You know, the mark of a good team is, do you figure out how to win when you're not playing your best? And I thought that's what they did down in Tampa. What did you think about it?
Well, especially on the road too, and you know, I got to tell you, after that huge Cincinnati win, you know, and USF having the season they've had, you know, leaving guys behind at the airport kind of thing, you know,
right.
It just smells with the rivalry that's been in the past. It just smells like a trap game, if you're going to use that cliche. And you know, as you turn the game on, and you know, it's a couple-point game, and you're just struggling through it. You get late, and I think a team that's learned how to win and been through the fires just finds ways and has that just unconscious confidence that, hey, you know, we're going to make the right play. Somebody's going to hit a big shot. Somebody's going to hit a quick 3 and keep us in it. And you just do enough to give yourself that chance until the end. And then you're just super impressed by, you know, Matt Williams hit a big 3. But then B.J. Taylor, I mean, the stretch they've had, when you think about the Temple game on the road, you think about the Cincinnati game, you think about that South Florida ending, he's been unbelievable. I mean, he's been the closer. He's been the guy that hits the step-back 3 or 15-footer that you just kind of say, wow, you know, we would have lost that game without him. And that's really what I looked at South Florida, is just making plays when it counted, and just that belief in the end that you were going to end up, you know, getting the W.
Which player has surprised you this year with how he has played? Because really, we had a lot of question marks even within the roster. Whether it be Taco Fall. I mean, we both watched Taco Fall last year. He would play limited minutes. I never thought he would turn into the defensive player of the year in the American Conference and playing 30 minutes. I know you and Mark talked about that on the radio as well. B.J. Taylor, second team all conference. But what's been the biggest surprise from a player standpoint from what you've seen?
Well, I think Matt Williams, you know, from the start to finish the year, was a surprise. You know, knew that he was a good player, had a good career at UCF, but to put the stamp that he did on this season, break the records he did, the durability that he's played. I mean, I don't even think he's missed a game and missed a minute. It seems like he's always on the floor. So that's probably the biggest, most pleasant surprise, just how great he's been. BJ, you kind of expected him, if he could stay healthy, just come into his own. Now in his third year, redshirt sophomore, just really playing like you thought and knew he would. But, it's been funny. I mean, if you look at the roster, and there's not that many to go down, right? So we could probably name them individually because we'd have that time. But it's kind of been some ups and downs. So Nick Banyard, you talk about having a really good start to the year, went through a lull. And then now that they're back in the winning streak, his scoring and his ability to make shots really helped them. So, and same thing with A.J. Davis. I think he struggled when B.J. Taylor got hurt. And then in the middle of the conference, when they needed him, he started making plays. He'd find you 12 rebounds. He'd, have a steal and a dunk to really keep you in a game. And so it's been an up and down season for just about everyone on the roster, and no one's exempt. Then Taco, his conditioning, I think, regardless of what any expert wants to say, I don't think anybody expected him to progress the way he's progressed in his conditioning and his ability to not get hurt. I mean, you watch him dive on loose balls. I don't know about you guys, but I'm like biting my nails.
Right.
Yeah. Ball, thinking, gosh, this could be it. But he's just he's durable.
Well, it's also a long way down when you're diving for a loose ball when you're 7'6".
Yeah, no, I remember we played with a guy, Stanley Billy, he's 6'11" and just lanky, and I think he was like 29 years old and loved the guy. But every time he dived on a loose, coach was like, "Don't dive on a loose ball. This is dangerous."
You're right. Oh, you're right.
Oh, go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, because it's funny you bring that up, because I remember talking to Coach Dawkins, and he's kind of said the same thing about B.J. Taylor because he's such an aggressive player, and he seems to always be falling down on the court. And Coach Dawkins, like, just be careful. Don't have to fall on the court all the time. We want to kind of make sure your career's lengthy, right? And that's a big part of it. Sometimes, I mean, we love the hustle plays and everything, but sometimes you got to protect yourself, don't you, as a player?
Yeah, and, when you play long enough and you get a good coach, they call that false hustle, and that's part of the progression, especially in college basketball, is you don't go for that steal that you don't have a chance at just to show that you're hustling, and you don't fall down when you can stay up when you're not going to get the call. And I think that's what Coach Dawkins was referring to.
Are you worried that that BJ might be doing a little bit too much?
That's a good question. I think there's been games where I certainly think when you look at us offensively, I think Tulsa, and particularly on the road, I thought that was a game that really sticks out that they'd really like to have back. And I think after that game, they really did some soul searching as a unit. But I think any time you have a point guard as dynamic as BJ is, a guy that can score really anywhere on the floor, especially when he's making shots from the outside, you run the risk sometimes of the ball sticking a little bit and not getting that movement, not getting that fluidity, not getting into Taco and playing inside and out, and really relying early on, on his scoring and Matt Williams' scoring. And, if they're not making shots, then you're just not scoring. And I think that when you watch them go through the losing 6 out of 7, I think that was part of the issue. Not necessarily BJ, but just not trusting to play inside and out first and to really take that first half and first 4 minutes of the game to get the ball whipping around and get everyone touching it and staying in rhythm. And then when you get a little later, you got the special players that are making plays, creating for themselves, and making shots. So I think when they're playing really well, BJ's deferring early and then really closes the half and really closes the game strong. And I think when they are not playing well, the ball doesn't go inside enough early, and then you're playing kind of reverse. You're going from outside in rather than inside out. So that'd be the one thing I'd say about that.
Taylor Young joining us here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Eric, go ahead, man.
Your thoughts, Taylor, when you saw the draw? It ended up being Memphis, 4-5 game. SMU wins the regular season. Obviously, UCF Memphis split the regular season. You called the game when they played at the CFE Arena when UCF jumped on them. They jumped them from the opening tip. I think it was like 12-0 right off the bat. And really, Memphis was never really into it. Your reaction when you saw the draw, did you like the draw? Did you kind of say, ooh, what was your reaction?
Like the draw. And, that's the whole goal, right? When you know that you're not an at-large bid, all you're trying to do is put yourself in a position for postseason and making a run at this thing. And a lot of it comes down to matchups. And Mark and I talked about this weeks ago, actually, before we went on one of the games and just talked about how we'd like to have Memphis. It's a team we've split with. It's a Memphis team that certainly is talented, but they're not overwhelming. And they're a team that I think we match up well with. UConn's been tough for us. We haven't matched up well with them in the last year or two. So that was one that we'd really like to avoid in the first round. And so I think the draw of Memphis is as good as you can ask. given our circumstances, although it's not going to be easy, of course. But you like your chances, given the 6 out of 7 that we dropped and then closing strong.
What concerns you about Memphis? Seen them in person, and you've seen every team in the league in person except Tulane. What's going to be some of the keys for people to watch the Memphis game, and for that matter, going into this tournament for UCF to be successful in the conference tournament?
Yeah, you look at Crawford from Memphis, and that guy, to me, is the X factor. Although he's one of their leading scorers, if he has a big game, they're tough. When he's making shots and he's making plays, they're really tough. Almost take Dietrich Lawson to say he's going to get his. Balls in his hands a lot, shoots a lot of free throws. Guy that'll probably have 18, 19, 20. But I think the game at home, Crawford really struggled, and we did a great job on him defensively. So that's really what I look like. What kind of game does he have? Does he blow up for 20-25, or does he have an 8-9 game where he really struggles? And I think that will be the difference ultimately in a W or an L.
Taylor, you played in games in conference tournaments before. Describe for those of us who've never been on the floor in that position the difference between regular season intensity and conference tournament intensity on the floor.
It's like everything you've done in the regular season, because it's truly that way, is gone. So you're looking at a guy across you, and it's the most pure form of competition because there's the light at the end of the tunnel. Somebody's dangling that one shining moment in front of your face and saying, this is your opportunity. All you got to do is go win 3 games, go win 4 games. And as long as you do that, your dream's going to come true. You're going to get everything you want. So you have every team's got that light. It's that fresh slate. You could be USF going to this tournament, and they're going to be saying the same thing as UCF's saying in this tournament is, hey, well, let's go win 3 or 4 games. And so that's the intensity goes up because there's that belief from every team to say, hey, as long as we don't lose, we can shock the world. I remember when I was playing Houston, I think they were, a 6, 7, maybe 8 seed in Conference USA. And they made that run, won the tournament, ended up going to NCAA. And that's that kind of dream for all these teams. And I think with that hope and that belief and that fresh start becomes just massive intensity. And you don't know what kind of crowd you're going to get. It depends on when you play, who you play. And in different venues, sometimes the crowd can be a lull, or sometimes it can be bananas. And I'm interested to tune in to Hartford and see what kind of crowd they're able to bring.
Well,
and the rims and the arena is a factor too, Taylor, right? Because I've noticed in a lot of these conference tournaments, for example, the ACC this year is playing at Barclays. The Big Ten's playing in D.C. A lot of these players haven't seen these courts before. I know Hartford's different, but there's an adjustment period too to the surroundings of where you're playing as a player, right? Yeah,
rims are tight. That was one thing when we played the Gators at Amway. You had a couple of the Gator players that were complaining that the rims were tight, and it's just a different atmosphere. It's outside of your comfort zone, and the teams that can adjust and defend are the teams that really have an opportunity. And I think that's why UCF matches up well, because they can defend. And whether that 3 ball, whether they're shooting 45% or 35%, they still usually give themselves a chance to win at the end.
Here's what I like about our draw, TY. We've got, so you get, assuming you get through Memphis, not to look too far ahead, but in the bracket, you're more than likely going to get SMU because they're going to play the winner at Temple in East Carolina. They're the 1 seed. So now, the wheels in my head start turning. You face SMU in the semifinals. If you beat SMU and you get to the championship game, you're going to be playing most likely Cincinnati or Houston. And then I'm starting to think to myself, what then does UCF have to do, or what can UCF do to get to possibly the NCAA tournament, if aside from obviously winning the whole thing outright?
Right. And that's the $1 million question. And, if you beat a team like Memphis, although they're not the Memphis of old right now, still a name brand, you beat them twice, then you go through SMU. Let's say you compete through Cincinnati, whether you win that game or not, say if you lose it late. The one thing, the American, I believe it's one of the last, if not the last games played.
It is.
Yeah.
It's the last one.
And regardless what anybody wants to tell you to say that stuff doesn't matter, it matters because everyone's tuned in. The selection shows in a couple hours. So you really have an opportunity to be that kind of last thought in people's mind. So you never know. You never know. I mean, I think the resume is put yourself, if you go through that run, that you're in the conversation. And I think any sort of bubble or hopeful for the NCAA tournament, that's all you can ask for.
Give me your thoughts about the rest of the conference. You've seen everybody, as I mentioned, in particular SMU and Cincinnati. They're the top 2 seeds. They kind of ran away with the regular season race, really, with SMU edging out Cincinnati. Why are those 2 teams particularly so good? And what's going to be the key to knock either of them off come this tournament?
Sure, and they're quite different, too.
Yeah.
Cincinnati's a veteran guard team with a big man that can score. When you look at Cincinnati's guards, they're able to shoot. They're very disciplined. I mean, Mick Cronin with Cincinnati, one of the best coached defensive teams consistently in the country. And when you stay around 3 or 4 years and they're talented, that's why they've had the year that they've had. It was along with Kyle Washington and his transfer and his talent. So team like that, offensively, UCF put them in a place I haven't seen them watch this year. Defensively, they just dominated Cincinnati, and Cincinnati just couldn't get it going. So, that's really the X factor because Cincinnati's going to defend. And then look at SMU. You just feel good watching them, man. I mean, they're basketball the way it's supposed to be played. I mean, they got 5 guys spread out. Everyone can shoot it. Everyone can pass it. No one really cares who gets theirs. Any guy can give you 20, 25. But they're not very deep. So if you talk about getting them in quick foul trouble, if you can put them in a position to where it just doesn't come easy and maybe you get off to an early start, I think that would be effective against SMU too. And you just hope that, that depth or that lack of depth, can really hurt them. And then also inside, they're not the heftiest team. You can hurt them inside, although it does create matchups on the other end of the floor because they spread you out so much. So it's a challenge, but I look at it and say, we can go back to those Memphises of old and Chris Douglas Roberts and all this stuff. By the way, Jeff, I love that we're saying, you just get past Memphis. I love that we're just assuming that, and that's where it's starting out. Because that,
who would have thought that back in the day, huh?
What do you mean get packed? Joey Dorsey's over there. What are you talking about? Derrick Rose is over there.
Oh, just get past Derrick Rose. We'll be fine.
Chris Douglas Roberts, CDR, man. I mean, holy mackerel.
Those guys really, you went into that game, you said, man, we got to play a perfect game to beat these guys. And not a lot of people did it.
Right.
I don't think either of those teams are them.
No, and let me ask you, it's funny you bring up those Memphis teams because I think you posted a photo on social media the other day because I think we were coming up to the 10-year anniversary of the last game that UCF played at the old UCF arena. In fact, there was a photo of you. You were on the bench and you were cheering on. You were very vocal there. What was it like back then? And then, being around the program, because I think you were there that year where UCF finished as a redshirt, right? You were redshirting when UCF finished second in Conference USA. And I remember that because the joke was, well, Calipari and Memphis, they're going to win the regular season title. So who gets to win the championship second place, which UCF did in the regular season, had that an emotional win against Houston. I'll never forget where Michael Dono hit a 3 in overtime. What was it like to be back then playing where Memphis was on this different level, but yet you still had a lot to play for and pride and obviously the atmosphere back then? Yeah,
but that's how it was, right? It was a national contender, and they had 3 or 4 NBA players. And, you were a college basketball program that was looking to compete and make something happen. But you talk about that UCF team, that gives me chills talking about that. I'll roll the ball up in pickup with that team. They're in my opinion, one of the most well-rounded, talented teams. Jermaine Taylor, Josh Peppers, Mike O'Donnell, Dave Noel, Lavelle Payne in his second year after JUCO. Guys that if you're a UCF fan, you should know. In that year was unbelievable. And I don't remember what we finished, maybe 22 wins. Really
22-9.
22-9, yep. And then lose at a buzzer beater from Morris Ullman at Rice in the first game that we play in the quarterfinal. So, but it was like that, Eric. It was Memphis, but it was fun though. You're playing against John Calipari, you're Tyreek Evans, Derrick Rose, Joey Dorsey, all these guys of the year that you now watch on TV, or some of them you do. So it was a good and a bad thing because it certainly deleted a lot of hope for those teams to really make a run in the conference tournament and win it and get that bid. But it gave you kind of that national exposure to that talent.
And that was one of my favorite, and I've said that, it's one of my favorite years of UCF basketball. It was one of my favorite teams of all UCF sports. It was just fun to watch. You mentioned the roster, and you all got behind Coach Sparrow. I mean, that was the thing. Coach Kirk was – there was that video footage on YouTube there where he's chest bumping with the in the locker room after an emotional win against Southern Miss. And, if we had today's postseason, you guys would have been a postseason team if we had the NIT and the CBI. Like they didn't have the CBI back then. They didn't have the deep NIT back then. Of course, Kirk now is an assistant at Iowa. They're trying to get to the tournament. But what was it about him that you guys – because it seemed from afar you guys would run through a wall for Coach.
Well, man, I still would. And he's a guy who really just grows on you. I mean, when he challenges you as a coach, a man of integrity, he cares about you, but he's going to hold you accountable. And that year – whether anybody wanted to admit it or not, everyone knew his job was on the line. And that's just the business. But, shoot, I was roommates and teammates with his son. I mean, there's family involved. And, when you had that atmosphere, you could see every game. I remember when we were up 22 at Houston with 10 minutes to go, and we lost in overtime. And you knew his job was on the line. You weren't playing for yourself. You were really playing for him. And man, I just looked at him physically, and it was just that kind of emotional year, and one of the most fulfilling years of basketball in my life, even though I was a practice player.
Well, I think back to that season, and I was actually away. I was living in Georgia at the time, but watching the team from afar and seeing what you guys were doing that year, it was really astounding because when I was a UCF student, we were doing. And Eric and I, we both did play-by-play when we were students for a number of different sports. But they were kind enough to let us do men's basketball. I mean, I called some of those games, including the championship game in 2005 when we were in the A-Sun. And on that roster, you know this just as well as anybody. I mean, there were still some guys who were holdovers from that sort of A-Sun era. And then all of a sudden you jump up from playing teams like, Jacksonville, and now you're playing, with the bright lights on in Memphis. I thought that was just an amazing coaching job by Kirk, for that year. And when you think back to, what this team now has to do, with, obviously different circumstances with, you obviously have a first-year head coach with Johnny Dawkins, but Eric and I both said this before, that this team sort of calls back to that team with their style of play, I think, and how they've improved over the course of the year and really would jump through a wall for their coach. Do you feel the same way about that?
It's heart. It's that X factor that doesn't show up in how many stars somebody has when they're coming out of high school, but it's just a group of men that are bought in. And, defensively, when you watch them play, I mean, that Cincinnati game at home, like, you're inspired to go to work the next day. Yeah. That kind of brand of basketball to where, even if you've never watched basketball and you're not a fan, you're like, man, these guys are getting after it. And then you couple that with the coaching job that Coach Dawkins has done. When you get down to the X's and O's of it, he uses Taco Fall and Matt Williams. A lot of times, it's a work of art, puts them in great positions to score. But when you couple all of that, I think you're right. It goes back to that sort of buy-in. And so, and there's so many different points of adversity that this team and this UCF squad doesn't end up where they are in right now with a chance to make a run. The fact that they're here with the adversity they face with injuries and a thin bench, a new coaching staff, and a new culture, it really is inspiring, and it just makes you fired up to be a fan.
All right, let me ask you the $64,000 question. UCF is going to win the American Athletic Conference tournament if, and fill in the blank for me, if what happens?
There's an upset along the way. Okay. If you talk about having to go through SMU and Cincinnati, And there's always a chance that one of those guys could go down. And I think if one of those guys goes down and UCF's playing well and they're playing good basketball, I think they have a shot to do that. And, of course, they have a shot if neither of those teams go down. But I think, to fill in the blank for that, was it $63,999 question? It would be if one of those, Cincinnati or SMU, takes an L and before they see UCF.
The fact that this tournament, by the way, Taylor, real quick, obviously, assuming they get past Memphis, I mean, there's no days off. I mean, it's back to back to back. I know UCF played in Charleston earlier this year, similar style. They played 3 games in 3 days. Is that a big factor because of the lack of depth? Is that a big issue, or is that overblown?
I think these guys have played a lot of minutes. They've been thin, and you got guys that are playing 35-plus minutes each game. And at this point, you're putting it all out there. You're not an at-large bid team. This is what you play for, and it's bananas and Gatorade, baby. You just survive and advance, and you cramp up, and when you do, you get out, and the next guy comes in, and then you get back in there. So this is like going back to AAU basketball when you have 4 or 5 games a day, and you're going to be in rough shape at the end of it. You just find a way to do it. So I think it's overblown, but it certainly is a factor because it just depends how tough a unit is, and I think UCF's got that in their favor.
Bananas and Gatorade. That's awesome. Are you heading up there?
I'm not, man. I like to stay where the weather is sunny and warm. But
it's got to be freezing up in Hartford right now.
Hey, even if it wasn't, I would say it is. And I'm going to be inside and in my house watching and tuned in. And, I'm really looking forward to just being a fan this weekend.
Oh, boy, it's 46 degrees and rainy right now in Hartford, Connecticut.
I'm close for that.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I don't blame you. I was in Connecticut last year for softball. We got snowed out, and trust me, you're making the right decision. Mark's got it, man. Mark's got it. He's got it. He's got it all controlled over there, Let him deal with the weather.
Call up Mark. Say, how's the weather up there? You seen the sun yet?
No, he'll send me a picture, and it'll be something like that. He'll send me a picture, and he'll say, hey, great weather in Hartford, but, had a good meal today or something like that. He always has some good captions of the script that really sum it up.
All right, Taylor Young joining us here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Taylor, we appreciate you as always, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, have a good one, fellas. See you.
All right. Oh, by the way, before you go, hey, how can people follow you during the tournament, and what are you going to be doing? You going to be tweeting during some of the games?
Live tweeting, man. I hope to. And if I'm not, I'm going to want to be. But it's Taylor B. Young, all, together. Taylor B as in boy Young on Twitter.
All right, T.Y. Thanks again, brother.
All right, see you guys.
Our thanks to Taylor Young. Stick around. The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is back after this.
Hello, Night Nation. I'm Andrew Fegley.
And I'm Trey Strelko. Where are we? This isn't our usual spot.
It looks like we've landed in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those guys.
Nightline has UCF sports covered.
Week in and week out, we bring you interviews with newsmakers and in-depth analysis of UCF sports.
Subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Be sure to subscribe to Nightline on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at UCF_Nightline.
Trace, can we go back to the 1148 studios now and start working on our next all-new Nightline?
How do we get out of here? Go Knights!
Charge on.
Now back to you guys in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff, Sharon, Eric Lopez with you. And all right, so we got our men's preview. Now let's do a little women's basketball review here. As the Knights currently at 20-11, but of course the story, their performance in the American Athletic Conference Championship. Got the 4-point win over the 5-seed Tulane on Saturday, and then that set them up. They were the 4-seed, and then that set them up to play against UConn. Now, the game was on national TV, Lopez. I actually watched the game, and UConn, like we expected, they did UConn things, right? Final score of the game was 78-56. Now, before you go saying, oh, well, UConn did what UConn's supposed to do. 31-0, by the way, UConn is at this point. Let's give some credit to UCF for slowing what I thought actually slowing UConn down, at least as good as anyone could have hoped to slow them down in the conference championship. UConn ended up obviously winning the championship, and they did so in spectacular fashion over USF in the final. It was really an impressive performance. They defeated USF 100-44 in the final. But let's not sleep on the fact that of UConn's 3 games, UCF gave them the best game. UCF was the only team to hold UConn under 100 points, and they held them to 78. They were the only team to hold UConn to less than a 40-point deficit. And I thought that it was sort of an instant replay of what UCF did in the first game against UConn, where they really slowed the game down. It's the only way that you can beat them. If you try and get in a track meet with them, forget it. They're going to do what they did. We saw Katie Lou Samuelson of UConn score 40 points and hit 10 out of 10 threes against USF in the final. But UCF, to the Knights' credit, did not allow that to sort of overtake the game. Granted, like I said, UConn's going to do what UConn's going to do. Final tally, though, Zai Lewis was 9 of 26, including 4 of 14 from 3. She had 22 points to lead the team in her maybe not her final game at UCF. Aaliyah Gregory, who I thought was strong in the early going, finished 6 out of 18. UConn adjusted the defense to kind of shut her down later on in the game. The Knights shot 36%. UConn shot 50% on the nose, including 16 of 25 in the second half. But I know this sounds like, remember the old, people complaining about the whole moral victory thing with football in the past 20 years, but was this, can you spin this into a positive for UCF, what they were able to do against UConn, losing by only 22 points at Connecticut, basically?
Yeah, I mean, it was a competitive game for a little bit.
We didn't back down, I thought, in that game. That's what I thought.
Well, no, and Gino, to his credit, I mean, the postgame, he talked about how UCF's a physical team, and I think it gave some of his players some issues. And I think from a defensive standpoint, I think that's the key. Is UCF's very good defensively. The problem is UCF just doesn't have the firepower to keep up with UConn. Then again, nobody does.
Nobody does. There are some men's teams that don't have the firepower.
No, but I think if you look at it, I think UCF's defensive style is kind of the blueprint, right? If you want to match up with UConn and have a shot from that standpoint. Now you got to get more talent, obviously, but that kind of style, be physical with them. And I think that's the key. See, USF,
they took the air out of the ball. They really did, and that's what happened. That's what I thought was the advantage for UCF.
Right, you can't run with them.
A shot, they had to do that.
Right. See, like the problem is, and you've seen USF in person in comparison, they're not a physical team. So that's why UConn, crushes them. Because it's and the other thing is
the style that UConn plays, and if you get into a track meet with them, forget it. They're going to beat you every time.
Right. Correct, and that's what USF likes to do, and that's the problem. They're just, that's the problem with it. And plus, I also said, if you remember, I think we talked about this in a previous podcast, about when would you rather play UConn? Would you rather play them earlier in the tournament or in the final? And a lot of people would say, well, take them in the final. Hey, at least you get to the final. My argument was your best shot to knock them off was before the final.
Oh, yeah, when they're looking forward to it.
Exactly, because once they get to the final, it's kind of like, hey, the door, it's the closing, the last 10 meters of a 100-meter dash. And unfortunately, USF found that out. So, no, I thought it was a lot of positives, and I think it showed the improvement too, right? Don't you think? As you were at when UCF played UConn on New Year's Day, the improvement that this team, in fact, Coach Abe afterwards in the post-game press conference in the tournament talked about the remarkable improvement of this team going from 7 wins basically last year to 20 wins this year, and the marked improvement on this basketball team in this season.
Really, really proud of our team, and just the big picture overall. 20 wins last year. They won 7 games, and this year we won 20. And you see that there's still a lot of fight left in them. And, that was the biggest thing for me, big picture, was to train our players to hate to lose. And now they're to that point that they're going to fight all the way down for 40 minutes no matter what. And, and it's really how I want their mindsets to be all the time. And so I was just really proud of their effort.
Well, she's right about that. I can't remember a team that grew as much in all the years I've been looking at UCF women's basketball. I don't remember a team that grew as much over the course of the regular season as much as this team did.
No, I mean, think about the player like Aaliyah Gregory. Who would have thought she would turn into a first-team all-conference member like she did this season? But she ended up. Zia Lewis ended up being third team, by the way. But first-team all-conference. I mean, one of the more improved players. And they maximized those two offensive players. You had the rebounding inside and physical play with Massey and Tolu and that group. And they were able to maximize and turn into a very good defensive team. And then the offense started to get better as the year went on. And look, that's why, I don't think that's their last game, right? I think everybody's very confident UCF will be in the women's NIT come next week. Their RPI is in the mid-90s at the time of this recording.
I'm looking at it right now, right there in the mid-90s. They're at 95. Yeah.
And, the belief, and being on campus and talking to people, I think they feel optimistic and confident that A, they'll be in the women's NIT, and then B, that they will host an NIT, the first round game. Now, the women's NIT takes place Wednesday through Friday, the 15th through the 17th.
First round is, March 15th through the 17th. By the way, selection for the women's NIT, mark your calendars, Monday, March the 13th, so the day after Selection Sunday.
Which will be probably a little late night. Due to the NCAA will come out in the women's NIT. So my prediction, all right, I'm just going to throw this out there, and you could play this back next week and say I was a genius or I'm a fool or both. I think they will host. I think they will play on Wednesday the 15th. And I think they're going to host the loser of the ASUN tournament between Florida Gulf Coast and Stetson. For those that don't follow, Florida Gulf Coast and Stetson have been the dominant top two teams in the ASUN now, going for 3 to 5 years. Stetson won the regular season for the first time in program history this past season.
Lynn Bria, former UCF head coach.
Correct. So they would host. Now they're playing the semis. They play them in the semis in DeLand. And then the championship game, if Stetson were to win their semifinal, they would host Florida Gulf Coast. It's a big rivalry, but they're both very good teams. Florida Gulf Coast is a very good three-point shooting team, and et cetera. I think the winner obviously is going to go to the NCAA tournament, assuming it's one of those two teams. Whereas I think the loser, whichever team doesn't win that tournament, will end up in the women's NIT, and I think that's going to be UCF's opponent for a couple reasons. As you mentioned, the women's NIT doesn't get announced until late Monday night.
Mm-hmm.
So the easiest thing to do is have UCF play one of those two teams on a Wednesday, because it's a bus ride for either team. You don't have to get on a plane on Tuesday. You could bus it either late Tuesday or early Wednesday morning if you want.
Right.
And as we know, the NCAA does not like to spend money. So what better way to just have an in-state game? We'll get into that in this May when softball and baseball comes around, pro season. But so I think that's going to be the matchup. And the reason why I keep saying Wednesday, Jeff, this is something to keep in mind, because there's always dialogue between, hey, can you host and all this stuff. And from what I'm sure UCF has put in a bid to host the NIT and all that. But as you know, and you know this probably actually better than anybody because you've worked there. So you know what I'm about to say. Because this week is the upcoming week's a hectic one, because the NCAA tournament first two rounds this year, Orlando's a location at the Amway Center,
right,
which will be taking place on Thursday and Saturday. Well, what majority of the staff is going to be working that NCAA tournament, Mr. Sharon?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, it's going to be I'm not 100% sure, actually. It's going to be either Stetson or UCF.
And both. Majority, yes, it'll be UCF. A lot of the UCF personnel will be working that NCAA tournament. They usually, like 2 years ago, it was very similar. Usually it was Stetson and UCF worked together on that, because, split up the crews, like stats crews and stuff like that. So my point is, a lot of the people are not going to be available, for example, that would normally work a women's basketball game on a Thursday. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Go to Friday, the dates you mentioned. Well, baseball's got a home game against Jacksonville. Softball's got a home game against Baylor. Again, faculty, you need staff people to work those two events.
Right.
I'm not, so my point is, I think from a UCF standpoint, if they're going to host that women's NIT game, they're going to probably say, as a favor, we would prefer to host Wednesday when there's nothing going on and we have people available to help us work that game. And I don't see a reason why they can't, the NIT could have, not helped them and oblige in that, because it's a really simple thing. You put Florida Gulf Coast or Stetson, whoever loses that can get a bus. I mean, obviously Stetson and UCF are very close, 30 to 40 minutes. That's easy. And even Florida Gulf Coast, you could do a 3-hour bus ride. Now, if you want, since you've got the RPI, you can you give me the Stetson and Florida Gulf Coast RPIs? Because if I'm not mistaken, I believe both of them are in the hundreds.
Stetson right now is 98. They're actually 3 spots behind us.
And where's Florida Gulf Coast?
I'm actually trying to search for them right
now.
There we are, 103.
Okay, and the reason why that's important, Jeff, and I single that out, is, RPI is part of the equation. They'll say, okay, who has the higher RPI? Okay, well, you get to host. And the thing with the ASUN tournament, it's not like there's going to be like that marquee win that's going to help your RPI. Let's be honest, whoever wins the tournament will obviously not matter, but if you lose, that's a big factor. So, but I guess the rambling on, I think UCF's going to host a women's NIT game, and I think it's going to be one of those two teams. If you want, you could float in Jacksonville. You could check their RPI, Jeff, and
Jacksonville,
see what their
by the way, 94th.
Wow,
so ahead of Stetson.
But of course, they, depending on what they actually, I haven't checked, and I don't know where their situation is in the conference tournament, but they might be done or may not be done, and who knows? The loser of Stetson, Florida Gulf Coast is going to get in before Jacksonville. But you're right, Jacksonville is a contender to be a possible opponent. And the fact that UCF finished 4th in a very good league, by the way, the American Conference, which I think will have 3 teams into the NCAAs with USF, Connecticut, and Temple. I think UCF is in good shape to host. We'll find out, like you said, late Monday night. But who knows, Jeff? We could be on call.
Right. Hey,
stand by.
I've got my cell phone on vibrate, or not on vibrate.
Yep.
Right? I got it ready to
Get
go.
ready.
So,
ready. But it's been a phenomenal success, regardless. Unbelievable.
And by the way, Florida Gulf Coast currently, right this instant, leading Jacksonville by 7 in the 4th quarter. So there's that. And then I think I saw the Stetson result from earlier.
Stetson was hosting a team against Kennesaw, right?
Oh, yeah. Stetson beat Kennesaw by 30.
Well, that's big because Stetson will host the championship game.
Yeah.
So that's the significant. And the reason, and I know some of our audience may not care, but I'm a big Lynn Bria fan, for the record. I've talked to her. I've known her. I know I got friends of mine in the UCF, and you know this. Yeah. There's people in UCF that are big Lynn Bria fans still to this day. In fact,
she really was genuinely beloved when she was here, and it kind of stunk how
awesome person.
Yeah,
awesome person. I met, I talked to her last year. As a matter of fact, UCF played Stetson last year in DeLand. I was there for the doubleheader. They did a doubleheader, Jeffrey, like the old days.
I know.
Women's basketball and then the men's basketball. It was a lot of fun to be there. So I got a chance to talk to her. Awesome, genuine person.
By the way, she
job.
signed a contract extension. It's extension at Stetson through 2021.
Well, and you know what helped that, right? Because her name was getting floated for the UCF job last year. And you know how this industry works, which is a great segue, Jeffrey. You're a master at this. Real quick, the Florida Gators job became available, open this week. Amanda Butler was fired. So, obviously, people that cover women's basketball speculating on what direction Scott Strickland, the athletic director, the new AD, no more Jeremy Foley, remember that, will go in, which is interesting because, and I talked to a friend of mine about this. This is very interesting about it. For Strickland, it's a unique situation because this might be the only significant hire that he does for a while.
Right.
When you think about it. Normally when the new AD comes in, there's a lot of programs that are in question marks, right? Not at Florida, obviously. Mike White's doing a heck of a job at Florida. He's good to go in men's basketball. I think you and I are big Jim McElwain fans. I think he'll be fine in football.
Most likely, more likely than not, McElwain will be fine.
He should be. I mean,
I agree, but they're Florida football fans. They think that they should go 11-0 every year.
That's a great point. Valid point. Kevin O'Sullivan is one of the better coaches in baseball in Florida. Tim Walton, obviously proven with a 2-time national champion in softball. So my point is, this might be the Strickland's only big move for a while as far as AD for Florida, as far as a coaching hire. And it's going to be interesting. Does he go for a big splash? Does he not? Coach Abe has been brought up as a name that could be a candidate for that job. And that's, I think, something that we're going to have to get used to, Jeff. It's weird. I think her name will always be a frequent name that's going to pop up frequently for a lot of big jobs. Don't you think? I feel like she's going to be one of those coaches that's going to be brought up for every big job.
Yeah, quite possibly. But I think that the other part about that is if you're Coach Abe, and maybe the way that we played against UConn was a factor in this, but, UConn is the golden goose, right? So why leave for somewhere else where you have your shot to knock off big bad UConn? And if she has a chance to develop UCF into a team that, UConn is not going to win every game forever. Okay, everyone knows that.
Sure.
All right.
Are you sure?
Well,
Are you sure?
I know for a fact that Gino Auriemma is a human being, and he will eventually not coach anymore due to one reason or another. So when that happens, someone's going to have a chance to beat UConn. So it may as well be UCF, right? You're going to get at least 2 shots at him in the regular season.
We'll see. I mean, who knows? I mean, it depends. I mean, other places might have better resources. Who knows?
Fair point.
Maybe, the good news is something to keep in mind. Unlike other sports, the salaries for women's basketball at Florida and UCF are actually comparable.
They are.
Which some people might not be surprised by that. Amanda Butler was making around $400,000, according to reports, at Florida, whereas according to reports, I think Coach James ranked around $375. Incentives,
according to reports.
Yeah, various reports when people have come out with stories about this stuff. So, and salary has been posted and all that stuff. So, not as big as, say, other sports where there's a bigger gap there. Mm-hmm. So that helps. To your point, I don't think this would be a money situation unless that Strickland feels like he needs to make a big move and spend more money on women's basketball. I don't know. That's up to them. Florida, it's unique at Florida because softball is the queen over there as far as their women's sports with their national championships, and they're actually expanding their softball stadium there with facilities and stuff. And then you have women's soccer there, which has been a long-time tradition there with Becky Burley, the head coach. And then Mary Wise, who you know very well, with women's volleyball has been there forever.
She's been there forever and a half.
Correct. So a lot of people would say that women's basketball at Gainesville, and people I've talked to up there, is number 4 from a women's sports standpoint. And that's not including gymnastics, which is as crazy as it's big in the SEC.
I was just gonna mention gymnastics too, because Florida has gotten very good at gymnastics, and they've sort of used to be Georgia and Alabama that were the 2 big gymnastics powers in terms of women's sports in the SEC, and Florida has now encroached upon their sort of that sort of duopoly, if you will. And laugh all you want about gymnastics, they pack the place for gymnastics.
They do. Yeah, no, people are into it. And their swimming program is very good. And women's tennis. I mean, just about everything in Florida is good because they have like $1 billion from SEC networks and televisions and the SEC. I mean, it's good to be from that standpoint. So
it's good to be in the SEC.
Yeah. So, but the point is they've never really pushed the women's basketball. So that might help from that standpoint. I don't think Coach Abe might go for that job if she ever does. I think if she were to leave, she might shoot for something higher. So that might help. But I think her name is a rising star in the industry, don't you?
Well, I mean, it's certainly going to rise now, considering what she's done at UCF, and people are going to start to look at, hey, she might have figured out something about the secret sauce with UConn, and that's going to be an interesting test to see in the laboratory. I think that she's going to want to get a couple more recruiting classes in and see if the gap closes a little bit. But obviously, I'd love to see Coach Abe stick around as long as humanly possible, because I think that the excitement around UCF women's basketball has returned. And like I said, we got to give credit where credit's due, and it's a situation where, she really didn't, bring in that many new players, like we've talked about before. And it's it's a credit to her job as a coach, and I hope that we get the chance to see what she's able to do another couple years on in advance here at UCF at least.
No question about it, and we'll see what happens. But I think the immediacy will be that I think she'll be coaching a women's NIT game, and I think hopefully probably at home.
Exactly. So, all right, let's switch gears over to baseball. And we want to check up on baseball because, this week they actually had another big midweek double dip where they had Florida State coming in. Florida State obviously ranked, I think, number 3 was the highest that they were ranked. And the Knights.
Number two.
I'm sorry. Okay. So UCF falls to Florida State actually in both games. This is following the sweep against Stony Brook this past week. The Knights lose both games at home to Florida State, 5-2 and then 5-0. We're recording this on Wednesday night, March the 8th, and the Knights lost the game earlier today, 5-0. Joe Sheridan fell to 2-1 on the season, but the story here is that the Knights are 11-3, even despite those 2 losses. They just never seem to get – Florida State always just seems to have our number, I feel like. Sometimes we'll get Florida, but Florida State seems to have our number.
Yeah, that's true, actually. I don't think it's funny. It's funny you mentioned that. I don't think UCF has beaten Florida State in Orlando in baseball since like the mid-'80s or some weird stat like that. Yeah. Now, they've won some games at Dick Hauser, and they've obviously faced each other in regionals, so they've won some games here and there. But, look, I was there. I was out there. I was there, especially Tuesday night. It was packed. Mm-hmm. I think they said there was like 3,300. There were some people that thought there were more people than the Florida game, which had 3,800. But look, Florida State, first of all, Florida State's really good. Let's just throw that out there. Let's give credit. Like, they got some arms. I mean, and they're very talented and athletic. And I think this was a challenge for UCF. And look, UCF, and in fact, Greg Lovelady said it best himself. I'm going to let him tell you. UCF got exposed a little bit by Florida State, and some of the things they're going to have to get better. Here's Lovelady explaining that.
I talked to the guys and just told them, this is a good challenge for us. I mean, this is a really, really good team, Florida State, really, really talented. I felt like it was a good way to grade ourselves out, and we didn't do a very good job. These are the type of games you need to have. I'm happy. I'm not happy that we lost, but we got exposed a little bit on doing some different things, some base running things, some defensive things, little things. And we don't get behind a fly ball, and the guy takes an extra base on a bang play that we probably should have had. Obviously, made some base running blunders. Those things you get away with when you don't play good teams. And when you play a great team, you got to make all those plays. You got to make you got to almost play perfect. And so again, we showed some things that we really, really need to work on, which is good. I'd rather learn that now than in 11 weeks in the conference tournament. So, it's good. I know the kids are bothered and upset, and they should be. But hopefully they come out tomorrow with a lot of energy in practice, and we try to fix some of the things that we're not doing a very good job of.
There you go. And that's one thing I like, Jeff, about Coach Lovelady. He is not going to beat around the bush. He's going to be really candid. And, he wasn't happy with their intensity the first night. And he knows they got to get better. But as I said last week after the Florida win, don't get overly excited. Don't print tickets to Omaha and stuff like that. I'm also going to caution and say, don't panic. Don't bail either. They lost to a very talented Florida State team that's going to be a contender for Omaha once again. They're going to contend for the ACC championship, which has some tremendous arms. I was impressed with their arms. They go deep arm-wise. And look, UCF offensively, Jeff, I think that's the question. I still feel pretty good about the arms that they have, especially I think they got some good arms in the bullpen. It's just right now the offense is kind of, and even you heard Lovelady mention it, offensively right now they didn't really challenge Florida. They were overmatched. And I think there's some questions there where the offense is going to come from when they face good pitching. That was the issue last year. Keep that in mind. So let's not act like we're surprised by that.
Well, they got 3 just in time. They got 3 games against Central Michigan coming up. Another Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And, by the way, make sure you hop on blackandgoldbanneret.com because don't forget our new friend, Brian Murphy is joining us, and he's been writing up quite a bit of baseball. He's going to be looking back at the Florida State matchup and look ahead to Central Michigan and what's the story with UC, and keeping an eye on the story of UCF baseball and Greg Lovelady's first year here, moving through the entire way. So, taking a look at, I'm actually pulling up Central Michigan right now, and they are 5-7 on the season. They've lost to, they lost 2 out of 3 to East Tennessee State. They split actually 4 games with Incarnate Word. Lost to Boston College, Villanova, and Northeastern. They beat something called Baldwin Wallace and Georgetown. So they've got 3. So they're really, really setting up the barn burners out there for the Chippewas are. So they got 3
Baldwin
against
Wallace.
Yeah,
that is incredible. Did you know? Seriously, you just make that up, right?
No,
you just made that.
That's for real. And in fact, after
a law firm?
2 days, yeah, 2 days after they play us, they play something else called Mary Grove.
Is that a street?
Yeah, it's located in Mount Pleasant, Michigan.
Okay. Cool.
So. Or excuse me. No, I'm sorry. That's a home game. They're playing this thing called Mary Grove at Central Michigan. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see what this team does in these next 3 games. They take care of business against Central Michigan, and put the Florida State game behind them. And then they got another midweek against Bradley coming up on March the 14th. That's a Tuesday night tilt, 6:30 p.m. So, by the way, 6:30, 6:30, and 1, those 3 games against Central Michigan, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, respectively.
And something to keep in mind. In fact, I'll let Coach Lovelady explain it to himself. It's a long, long season, and it's better that the Knights kind of find what they need to work on now than find this out during the conference tournament, as Coach Lovelady says here. We still got time between now and the conference tournament.
Maybe just a little bit, but not much. We got to get better at that, and understanding that we're still learning how to win these type of games, and we're still growing up and learning some of the things that we're going to need to be able to do to win a conference championship and win games in a regional. So, we showed a lot of things that we need to work on, and we're not nearly where we need to be. And I'm glad we got 10 more weeks to figure it out.
He's right about that. And a quick reminder, by the way, conference play starts the end of this month, March 31st. So it's going to be coming real quick, fast and furious indeed. And then don't forget, then it's basically 2 months, and then you have the conference tournament at the end of May in Clearwater. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. But hey, I can't complain too much about an 11-3 start right now, especially when you started 11-1. And you lose 2, and the 3 games you lost were to in-state opponents that are ranked top 5. Not bad. Speaking of long seasons, and we want to get in touch with this, and it's here's where your specialty is going to come in, Eric. Softball. Coming off of a difficult game earlier today. Like I said, we were recording this on Wednesday, March the 8th. UCF Softball. This came up short against don't scoff at this, because they lost to James Madison 9-1 earlier today. James Madison's a very good team. This coming on the heels of taking all 3 of their games at the UCF Invitational over the weekend, defeating Providence twice, including a bizarre 11-10 extra innings game that we were both at, Eric. And then they beat Florida Gulf Coast on the Saturday 5-3. And then beat Providence again 3-1 on Sunday. But a weird week for UCF softball, wasn't it, Eric? I mean, that first Providence game was just a bizarre game, and then this James Madison team comes in and they're pretty good, and they showed why, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with that the Providence game you mentioned Friday. That was unique, 11-10 ball game.
Both teams had 3 errors in that game. It was one of the strangest softball games I've seen in quite some time.
And very unique at UCF. You realize, up until that point, that was like UCF's 935th career game in program history. 935. You know how many games, and I tweeted this out on Eric Lopez Elo. You know how the 11-10 game. You know how many games UCF softball has been involved where both UCF and the opponent scored 10 runs or more in the same game?
You told me this. It was the first one, wasn't it?
No, it was the fourth
okay.
time in 935 games
that both teams have scored double digits.
Correct. UCF, the most recent one was in 2013 when they played in Las Vegas. UCF lost to UNLV 12-10. Anybody that's been to Las Vegas, the ball jumps out in Las Vegas.
Right. Well, you're a mile high in the air anyway. With
exactly.
The
right.
height, so, yeah.
Correct. One of the other games they played was in 2010 at UTEP, speaking of which, with the altitude in El Paso. The ball, it's like I've been to El Paso in that stadium. It's like the Coors Field of college softball. The ball jumps out of there. And UCF won that game 12-10. The only other game they had at home was against Monmouth in 2011 when it was an 11-10 ball game. That's it. Every other game, those are the 4 games that had 2 teams score over 10 runs or more. You asked me this question too. The most runs, by the way, that UCF has ever been involved with in a game combined was 25 runs back in 2004 in the ASUN Conference Series when UCF was at Belmont and UCF won 18-7, 25 runs. So that's the highest scoring game. I know you asked me that in the press box, and I looked it up afterwards.
I know that our all-time high for points in a game, runs in a game was 23 against
24. Morris Brown
against Morris Brown. Yeah, I actually remember that series. I think I may have even done a couple of those games back in the day. But
good games.
That was
noteworthy about that game. Yeah, Paisha Simmons, a perfect game.
Yeah. So, but. Again, it was a weird game, but I was glad to see that they recovered pretty quickly and they beat Florida Gulf Coast out of the ASUN.
Yeah, pretty good Florida Gulf Coast team that won the regular season. The ASUN beat Providence again, and the thing that was resilient about the team, they came back. The point is, whether it be the Providence game or the Florida Gulf Coast, they responded when the other team responded. So it was a back and forth. So they were able to fight back, and so it was a very successful weekend. Aaliyah White, 4-0 last week, was tremendous. James Madison, they just ran into a buzzsaw. Megan Good, young pitcher, who's right now number 1 in the country in ERA. Her ERA coming into this game was a .19. She's only given up 2 runs. In fact, she's currently on something now up to like 55 to 60 scoreless inning streak going. Not only is she arguably the best pitcher in the country, she might be one of the top 5 players in the country, period, because she could hit. She had a 2-run homer in UCF. We really set the tone. She had 4 RBIs. She's a stud player. She's going to be up for Player of the Year candidate. And James Madison's a team that was a win away from the Women's College World Series last year, and they're going to be a legitimate contender again with her this year. So you ran into a buzzsaw in her, and that's unfortunately, Jeff, as we've talked about, this team is young. You got 9 freshmen. 7 true freshmen on the roster, 9 total if you include Autumn Gillespie and Tamisha Glover, who are redshirt freshmen, who both of them sat out last year. Autumn due to injury during the season. Tamisha just sat out, period, just a redshirt. It's a young team, and as you know, being around a bunch of teams, when you have a young team, you're going to have your ups, which are going to be very high, and then you're going to have some lows, like you did against James Madison, where they just were out. They didn't play well, quite frankly, and I think they'd be the first to tell you. So you got to put it behind you. You throw it out the garbage, as they like to say, and you now got to focus on a weekend because you've got a pretty good Ohio State team from the Big Ten coming in, and you got top 20 ranked Georgia highlighting the field there, and an improved Mercer team as well.
Yeah, this is the Wilson D. Marini tournament. We got 5 games coming up in 3 days. The doubleheader on Friday is going to be Ohio State and then Delaware State for UCF. Saturday, Georgia at 3 p.m., Mercer following that, and then 1 game against Mercer, 1:30 p.m. on Sunday. So very busy weekend for UCF. And then they follow that up with a doubleheader on Tuesday against Iowa State coming into town. So it's going to be so that's 7 huge games in 5 days, Eric. Is that right? So yeah.
It's a lot of softball. It's a lot of softball,
and this is where the season's really going to start picking up. So. All right, let's flip over real quick to tennis. And men's tennis actually came up with a big victory actually just in the last couple of hours. It was a big event down at the USTA National Campus. And, Eric, we've talked about how cool this kind of stuff would be when we get the chance to do this. It was college match day at the USTA campus. They had a bunch of college matches going on at the same time. One of them was against Penn State, UCF against Penn State, and the Knights get the win over Penn State. It was actually televised on ESPN3, which is pretty cool. And UCF gets the win. So the men's tennis team right now is at 7-4, and they what do they have here? So they've got so that's a big one over a Big Ten opponent. Now they've got a match against Tulsa coming up on Friday, so their schedule is picking back up. Right? They beat Davidson 6-1. They knocked off Penn State, and they're going to be playing against Tulsa and South Alabama, Tulsa and South Alabama coming up at the USTA National Campus. But this is pretty cool. I love the fact that we're able to do these kinds of things at the National Campus, and that sort of makes the it just gives the UCF tennis so much more gravity, doesn't it? There's UCF against Penn State, followed by Florida and Florida State, and then the Florida women's team will be playing a little bit against number 3 Ohio State. That'll be later on this week. But two big matchups. In state, and UCF gets the win over Penn State. Man, that's pretty cool.
The beauty of being in a new place, man. People will come, right? If you build it, they will come, and I think it's an attractive place for teams to come and play. And I don't know how, but we both got to head out there. We've been invited multiple times.
I feel bad that we haven't been out there. We really owe an apology to everyone who's out there who we haven't been.
It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Right.
It's going to happen. We don't know when, but it's going to happen. We'll make something work because I've talked to people that have gone there. Are not even tennis fans, and they said it's an incredible place. So it definitely it's a must. I think on the must-dos list.
Yeah, I owe Bridget Gale because she and Brian Ormiston incidentally, because they've both been like, you guys got to come down here, and so I'm hoping that we'll get the chance. So by the way, Friday, March the 10th, or the women's team, by the way, they've got 3 matches coming up 2 matches coming up this weekend. Thursday against Furman, Friday against South Alabama at the USTA as well. They also have Tulsa coming up, but that's not until March the 18th. Got a couple of road matches against Tulane and Rhode Island, both of those in New Orleans, coming up as well. Flipping over to golf, just a quick update for you. The men's team, they have basically almost a month off. They finished up the Haight tournament. That's Hayt, hosted by Florida Gulf Coast down at Ponte Vedra Beach. They've tied for 3rd in that tournament, and they have basically almost a month off before they play at the FAU Sloman Autism Invite, which will be down in Lake Worth in Palm Beach County, March 24th through the 26th. Women's team, incidentally, also has quite a bit of time off after they were in the All-State Sugar Bowl Classic. This weekend, actually, they are at the Lady Gator Invitational in Gainesville, 2-day tournament, Saturday and Sunday. So be on the lookout for that as well. All right, and then, Eric Lopez, we really have the sports equinox hitting in full stride because we have a track and field meet next weekend, March 17th and 18th, the UCF Black and Gold Challenge. And then also rowing gets started with an actual home meet. They were in the Metro Cup earlier this month, or earlier last week, against hosted by Winter Rollins over at Winter Park. And at the UCF Intercollegiate Rowing Center over at Lake Pickett, UCF will have a meet with UConn, Jacksonville, and Nova Southeastern on St. Patrick's Day, Friday, March the 17th. So it's literally everything is happening on St. Patrick's Day this year, March 17th. So it's going to be a wild couple of weekends here, and it may get even wilder with college basketball firing up, and hopefully we can see some more postseason coming up for UCF men's and women's basketball. So
we can't leave though before we move to the big news in the NFL.
That's right. I forgot to mention this.
You're a beloved Giants fan.
Yes.
And they just signed Brandon Marshall from UCF, who you covered.
Yep, covered him from through 2004. He was 03 and 04 was his first 2 years at UCF, and was it 03 04? I can't remember, but yeah, Brandon Marshall's a Giant. He was a Jet the last 2 years. Actually had a career year in 2015 with the Jets, but now is they signed him to a 2-year, $12 million deal. He'll be on the other side of the formation from Odell Beckham Jr. The Giants let go Victor Cruz, incidentally. The fact that Victor Cruz made it back from that awful knee injury that he had was pretty remarkable. But yeah, listen. I am always happy when the Giants have a UCF player. I think if I'm not mistaken, he's the first UCF Knight to play for the Giants since Darcy Johnson. If you're
the Giants fan, if anybody would know, it would be you. That would be you if you would.
Darcy was there. The Giants actually drafted Darcy, and he actually had a cups of coffee with the Giants. And I remember he came over to campus one time, and I met him. He was shooting something for a TV show. He had just finished his rookie year. And I remember it was the first time that I'd actually seen him like outside of a football uniform, outside, because he had just started at UCF when I was a student, doing student radio stuff. And I was like, I sat him down and we were doing an interview. I was just, and it's funny, I'll actually have to find it because there's a photo somewhere about it. And Darcy, someone else was hosting this interview. I was actually on the crew for this interview, but Darcy like completely dwarfed the other person in the frame. He's so big, and I love Darcy for he was so kind and nice in that interview. And actually, and I told him, I said, Darcy, I'm a big Giants fan, that, so I'm glad that we have you. He's like, really? No kidding. Come on over here. So we walked over to his car over by the Wayne Dench Center. And he insisted. I was like, I can't do this, man. He's like, no, come here. And he handed me an autographed photo of him in a Giants uniform, and I still have that. I have it hanging here in my office. It's one of my, it's actually one of my few like memorabilia sort of prized possessions that I really enjoy. So I'm glad Brandon's at UCF now because Brandon and Darcy were teammates back in the day, and Brandon's getting up there. He's 32 now. I'm 33, but I'm hoping that he he has a big year for the Giants, and I think there's no reason to think that he shouldn't with the offense that they run with Ben McAdoo and Eli Manning's getting up there. I know the Giants want to make one more year, make at least one more run at the Super Bowl, and I think if they're going to do it, it's going to be on the back of really high-powered offense. And when you have Odell Beckham on one side, you have Brandon Marshall on the other, who's basically going to be the possession receiver, which seems kind of unbelievable when you think about it. But I think he's going to help out Eli tremendously. Now we got to go get a running back.
Well, by the way, Darcy Johnson played for the Giants from 06 to 09.
Yep.
Other UCF players that have played for the Giants, a little more of a cup of coffee type of guys. Trevante Johnson.
Yep, Trevante was on the roster, I think, in a preseason.
Yep, 07. Michael Greco.
That's
with
right.
the Giants preseason 2010 as a free agent.
They
defensive
gave
back.
him a shot. Yeah, they gave Greco a shot as a safety. That's right.
Steve Edwards, 06 and 07 with the Giants, offensive tackle.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Joe Burnett had a cup of coffee in 2011 trying to make it with the Giants after playing the first 2 years with the Steelers. Remember, he was drafted in the 5th round by the Steelers, and after 2 years, he tried to make it on with the Giants.
I think it was after that Joe went to the
Jaguars.
He went to the Jaguars.
Yeah,
but then he moved over to the CFL.
Actually, I misspoke. He didn't go to the Jaguars. He went to the Jacksonville Sharks of the Arena Football League.
Right. But then he jumped up to the CFL, and he said, "Listen, you want to be proud of a guy who's really made something out of his pro football career? Go look up what Joe Burnett has done in the CFL, because he has had one hell of a career in the CFL."
Correct. Heck of a career there. Yeah. So, Leisure Douzable played 2 years with the Giants, 08 and 09.
Yep, Leger was up there, but that was before he got really good.
Well, you let him go early. That's your fault.
Yep.
But yeah, no, and then also one of my favorites, Sharif Rashad, had a cup of coffee with the Giants, defensive back, 09 and 010. So you've had a few.
Yeah, we've had a few out there. There was, everyone. I was always happy to see the New York Giants scout kind of scouring the UCF press box back in the day, and that was always that was always good to see. I was like, okay, we know that I know that the Giants are around, and whenever there was a UCF guy who went for the Giants, I was always happy. So, and Brandon Marshall has a chance to be the most successful UCF Giant. At least
here's the burning question. The burning question. Hot, controversial question. Where does Brandon Marshall rank all time as far as the best wide receiver rankings in UCF football history?
All right. Now, here's my question. How are we going to measure this? Are we measuring this by his UCF career or by his
Let's go with UCF. Just go
career?
with UCF. UCF. Obviously, if you include the pro career, I think Marshall and Sean Jefferson, right?
I think Brandon Marshall takes it hands down.
Over Jefferson?
Easily over Sean. As good as Sean was and as durable a career as he had, but Brandon Marshall's an all-pro. He's for his time, he's one of the 3 best receivers in the NFL. When you kind of have like when you have like the championship belt at some point, which I think Brandon certainly did at a couple points in his career, you're the guy from that school. In terms of the best UCF wide receiver ever,
Yeah, it's a fun one, right? I mean, obviously you were there. We were there when Marshall was there. His last game was the Hawaii Bowl.
Right, his last game. Boy, did he make himself a lot of money in that game because Stephen Moffitt just said, I'm going to throw the ball to Brandon Marshall on that last drive to try and tie the game. And that's where the real legend of Brandon Marshall started. But I remember when Brandon was actually playing both ways because we ran out of guys in the defense.
He was a starting defensive back.
Yeah, he was a starting defensive back, and he played on offense because because they were so shorthanded.
Such an incredible combo with him and Mike Sims-Walker. Mike unfortunately had injuries that really kind of hurt his career in the NFL. But Brandon's probably you're right. I mean, he's probably, you look at he's probably the face of the football program. I know people are going to say Blake Bortles right now, but Blake had a really tough year in Jacksonville, and certainly people are questioning his future there. Latavius Murray had a nice year. Well, it's the free agency big. We got a couple of nights. Latavius Murray, we'll see what he ends up, free agent, and of course AJ Boye is going to be a rich man.
Yes, he is.
Everybody wants his services. How about him? He's an incredible. We'll get to him in a second. But best wide receiver UCF football history.
Brandon's the best I've seen. Brandon's the best I've seen, and it's close with him and Mike Walker, to be honest with you. Hard to believe that we had them both at the same time. Doug Gabriel's up there, certainly from what I saw. But Brandon was the best guy, was the best wide receiver wearing the black and gold that I ever saw. And I think if you want to know why, go back and look at that last drive against who was it that we played in the Hawaii Bowl that year? Was it I forget who it was. Gosh, I can't believe I even forget. Nevada Reno. That's right. Go back and look at that game and look at that last possession after we got and really the 2 possessions on either side of that onside kick, and into the overtime, and you'll see why Brandon Marshall why he gets my vote. What about you?
Well, let's first pay respect to the man who, and this is the guy that really should be answering this question, and maybe we can get him in the spring or something. Sean Beckton.
Yes.
Probably knows a lot more than you and I do, because either
whenever
he's
we
a Hall
get
of Famer
Sean to
himself.
answer that question, I will defer to his expertise.
Right, because think about it. First of all, he's a Hall of Fame player in his own right, so he can make an argument for himself if he wants to, right? But second of all, he's coached the majority of all these guys. He's coached them all, most of them. So he would be the guy I would ask for that. So he needs to be in the list, right? He needs to be in that list.
He's got to be up there.
I would say, and I'm trying to think at the top of my head. It's funny, I asked the question. That's why I asked it. In fact, I agree. I think Brandon Marshall is up there, has to be up there. Super talented. From that standpoint,
I'll go with Marshall, Walker, and Gabriel. 1, 2, 3.
I mean, Sean Jefferson, I didn't see, but he was tremendous.
Yeah.
Sean Beckton speaks for himself. Interestingly, Beckton's in the Hall of Fame. So is Sean Jefferson, by the way. I'm looking actually to see which wide receivers to this point. And granted, it's a young Hall of Fame list. Those are the 2 guys that I see from a receiving standpoint that are in the Hall of Fame at this point. I'll give you a name. I'll throw some names. I don't think he's the best one, but I'll give you some guys I enjoyed watching. Jimmy Frisell.
Yes.
Was really good. Late 90s, man. That was fun.
J.J. Wharton, all the stuff that he did for UCF throughout his career. I'd tell you.
Sia Burley was very good. Had a really good arena football career with the Orlando Predators, among others, in there. Was a very good receiver that I enjoyed watching. Brashad Perriman was fascinating, right? He just kind of had some big catches. Obviously, Hale Perriman at ECU.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, though, the full body of work makes him the greatest receiver ever, but certainly
I think the jury's out on him because the jury's been out on his pro career to this point. But I'm hopeful that he'll be healthy.
Right. He'll hopefully get healthy and he'll have a good college. He had a good college career as well. Doug Gabriel, by the way, good choice. Good. Glad you mentioned he was dynamic back in those days there. But, man, I think I kind of have to agree. I feel like I would go with Brandon Marshall. I want people – this is what I want. See, I brought this up for a reason. I want people to tweet out or Facebook, because we do get that from time to time, and I want them to throw out who do they think is the best wide receiver in UCF football history. Throw it out there to us, and we will read your comments in future episodes if you give a good answer.
And also, someone find me that last drive against Nevada in the Hawaii Bowl, because that was a masterpiece by Brandon Marshall, no question about it. So cool. He
was tremendous. Now to the other quick free agents, I mentioned Bouye, AJ Bouye, big money. Did you think he would be this good in the NFL to the point where he's going to get paid a lot of money, and he's a Pro Bowl guy now. He's going to be a Pro Bowl type player for AJ Bouye. And he had a very good career. I mean, secondary, we're talking about wide receivers. UCF has a great tradition in the secondary.
Yes, an even better tradition in the secondary, I think, than even at the wide receiver position.
Yeah,
even
absolutely.
Going back to Travis Fisher, who's now coaching at UCF. I remember when he was drafted, and we were so happy to see one UCF player drafted in the NFL draft, just hear a guy call his name. And UCF's tradition, even going back to obviously Asante Samuel, at one point, I like to think of guys as having like the championship belts at certain positions in the NFL. And Asante had the NFL defensive back championship belt there for a while. Atari Bigby had a couple productive years in the NFL. Can't forget that. We mentioned Joe Burnett. And the successful career that he's had as a
Josh Robinson is in the NFL.
And
how about Jacoby Glenn? Jacoby Glenn, who was not drafted,
who was the defensive player of the year in the conference, remember, and then didn't get drafted. And remember, O'Leary wasn't all that happy about him coming out early.
Well, he was right. It was a bad advice. He got bad advice. He should have stayed another year. He probably would have gotten drafted.
But to his credit, he fought through. And I think now he's found himself a pretty good spot. But AJ, and is kind of hidden down in Houston for a while. But now there's a report in the Houston Chronicle saying that his offers are averaging $12 million or higher. I mean, goodness me. I mean, that's it's the question is always like, did you think he'd be that good? No. I mean, I don't think anyone thought that. I don't think anyone thinks that any of these guys would be. That quote, that good, end quote, whatever that means. I'm just glad that it's happening to AJ because he totally deserves it. He's worked very hard since he came. He was a hard worker at UCF. And he's continued that work ethic at the pro level, and I'm really happy for him. I think he deserves that. Young guy from Tucker, Georgia, moving on up in the NFL. I'm glad to see him. I mean, I'm glad to see him having such tremendous success because you see these guys sort of realize their potential, and it's fun because we see them, when they come in and they were 18, 19-year-old kids, and now AJ is going to be a multimillionaire, and that's awesome.
That is incredible. He was undrafted. And it just tells you that first of all, scouts
free agent in 2013. It's amazing what. And I think that
blows me away.
I think that's part of it. Like I love guys like that who kind of have the chip on their shoulder because I know for a fact that AJ Bouye, looking at when he was not drafted in 2013, basically looked around and said, okay, whatever team I sign with, they're the only one out of the 32 teams that is not going to pay for me not getting drafted. And I love guys who have that sort of work ethic, that chip on his shoulder. And he's never let up since, and he deserves that.
And we're probably going to be adding another defensive back here in the NFL after we just saw in the combine. You saw who had one of the best NFL combines.
Yeah, Shaquille Griffin, 4.38 in the 40.
Yep.
Lord in heaven, that's faster than I think he really outdid himself in that on Monday. I mean, he
had a great vertical too. We had a great vertical too.
That was the fourth fastest defensive back time.
Wow.
In the fourth fastest.
I think he made himself some money. It reminds me a lot of Josh Robinson, who had a tremendous combine and really, jumped in the draft because of that. Could be the same for Mr. Griffin there. So the tradition continues, man. That's why I kind of wanted to bring that up because even though it's the offseason football, it's amazing that some of the bigger offseason football storylines, Jeff, UCF's involved in it.
Yep.
The pros.
UCF fast, baby. That's what it's all about. So that should be fun. What do you have coming up this week?
Well, I have obviously Tuck and O'Neill. Got softball this weekend, but certainly I'm excited because you're going to be filling in for me on softball on Friday.
That's right. I will be filling in for you for the two softball games on Friday, and it's
Ohio State, Delaware
Ohio State, Delaware State. Sorry about that. For some reason, I had Georgia on my mind, and I flashed back to
that's
Tacoma.
Saturday. I get the Saturday game. Saturday game there for there. But yeah, Ohio State and Delaware State. You'll be on the call on Knights TV. You could watch that all over a lot of devices, right?
Yeah, it'll be all over the place. UCFKnights.tv is where you especially want to catch it, and it'll be good working with the folks from UCF Video once again, who are the best in the business at that. So, and thanks to you for letting me actually fill in for you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Obviously, I got commitment with the radio show Tuck and O'Neill that I'm doing. So you're stepping in. I appreciate that very much. It'll be exciting. I know you'll do a great job. I mean, you used to call softball back in the day, so it's not like it's a fourth thing to you.
I'm used to actually doing softball on a tape delayed basis back in the day when we didn't.
Well,
have
this
a live
ain't
feed
tape
coming out of there. this is live, baby. This is live and on video.
Yeah, no editing on this one. You'll have some fun with that.
So as we wrap things up, hey, once again, we want to send a special thank you to Taylor Young for coming on our show. You can follow him at Taylor B. Young on Twitter. And also follow Eric Lopez at Eric Lopez Elo, and follow me at Jeff_Sharon. Don't forget to go to blackandgoldbanneret.com for some of the latest news on our podcast, and also Brian Murphy's baseball analysis as well. We thank Brian. We'll have him on the show soon enough once baseball season continues here. Don't forget to hit us up on Facebook as well at Black and Gold Banneret. You can also subscribe to us via email at blackandgoldbanneret.com, and subscribe to this podcast if you don't already on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and TuneIn. And do us a favor, send us or give us a rating on iTunes. I think we only have, Eric, check me on this. I think we only have one person who's rated us so far on iTunes, and we thank that person for their rating. But we'd love to see a few more out there, just to let and tell your friends, tell your UCF friends about the show, and let them know that we're out here and we do this for you guys. We certainly don't do it for us. We do it for you guys. And one last note, Eric, before we get going, congratulations to our buddies Trace Trilco and Andrew Fegley on 100 shows on the Nightline podcast. I wanted to get that out there and wish them a hearty congratulations from the two of us, and hopefully we'll be getting there pretty quickly since we're already in the 30s, Eric.
Yeah, it was funny. I hung out with Trace at the Florida State game. He asked me when he's going to come on the show, and I told him, well, the problem is Jeff keeps ducking you, Trace, so I don't know what to tell you.
Trace, I promise you, you're going to get you. I'm going to get them on. We're going to get the two of them on at one point. I think it's going to be fun. Maybe we'll do something. We got a huge summer. We got a huge summer coming up. We got where we're going to be begging for storylines. So we'll try and we'll try and get them on. I think at the very
we got to
latest
do. We got to do.
Summer.
Well, we got to do, because Trace has got that game. I told you about this in the previous podcast. He's got this game that he does with his buddies at basketball, where like whoever gets the highest score gets a certain amount of points, and they have this contest. We got to come up with a contest where we do something with them, and whether it be, I don't know if we can do it in football. It's tricky in football. If we just pick a skill position player to have a good game, a fantasy thing, I don't know. Maybe we could do it next year in basketball or something. But we need to have a fun little deal there, maybe online. We can follow through the year, because I can tell you, having sat with him, that was kind of fun. It was fun to be around him in the basketball game as that was going on. because he was trying to hope that Nick Banya would score so he could get a point and win his contest. And I know that they do that other stuff. So, yeah, we could do something with those guys and maybe throughout the year and do some little contest between them. But, yeah, we'll definitely get them on at some point.
We'll figure it out. Congratulations once again to Trace and Andrew. So as we wrap up here, once again, for Eric Lopez, and once again, a hearty thank you to Taylor Young for joining us. For Eric Lopez, I'm Jeff Sharon. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Catch you again next week.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.